Irish Halloween Mass?
In California, you never know.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our Mind Your Movies podcast. Happy Halloween.
That
Today
was a
we're
quote from the movie.
that is a quote from the movie.
We're
So
starting episodes with quotes from the movie now.
this is the a quote from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, uh 1982. This is a Halloween movie that does not feature Michael Myers. We'll get to all that, but it's
The
written
only
and
one.
directed, the only one. Although some of them might have been better off, but written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, sometimes credited just as Tommy Wallace in other movies. But
Hmm.
um, this movie is an hour and 36 minutes. Um, and it's produced by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, who wrote the first and second ones and uh, produced the second and the third. So,
Yeah, I noted that Tommy Lee Wallace, the director, he was also like an editor and production designer for the original Halloween, and he worked on The Fog with John Carpenter. He was also like art department for Dark Star, and he did sound effects for Assault on Precinct 13. So he was very much like a John Carpenter collaborator, and he got sort of promoted to directing this. I think this is the first big thing he directed. Maybe he did some TV before and after, but
mhm.
and he ended up directing the It like miniseries. That was the biggest thing I saw in his credits.
Yeah, and he did Fright Night 2, which like is a memorable name because of the first one, perhaps. But
Yeah, I've
um,
never seen it.
yeah, but yeah, I think him and John Carpenter were actually childhood friends. I read so.
Oh, cool.
Um, and I think he was in consideration to direct Halloween 2, but ultimately only ended up directing Halloween 3.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Um,
I don't know who did Halloween 2.
Yeah, I was looking at it earlier today actually, and I don't remember. These
Yeah,
movies are
there's
like a mess.
yeah. Well, also a cool thing about this movie is that it was shot by Dean Cundey, who also shot Halloween 1 and 2, but
Ah,
he shot The Thing, Back to the
oh,
Future, Jurassic Park, and he did like The Fog and Escape from New York and some other Carpenter movies too.
wow. No wonder why this movie looks amazing.
Yeah. Amazing might be pushing it a little bit. I mean, come on.
I will say the cinematography of this movie is one of the better parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
definitely better than you'd expect from like a random 80s slasher sequel.
yeah, right. Um, so maybe just real quick, jump in. Like here's like the quick synopsis of the plot. Um, there's I'm not going to use their names because I don't. Do you remember their names?
I think it was like it was Ellie
Oh,
and
Ellie,
Dr. Daniel.
Dan, and Dr. Daniels.
I called him Dr. Dan on my notes.
Nice. See,
Yeah,
I don't write names in my notes. Anyways, um, big problem.
that's your problem.
I know. Okay, so Ellie and Dr. Dan essentially get tied into going to investigate this Irish company at
It's
that
very important that they're Irish for
it
some
is
reason, for no reason actually.
very important. That's mass producing these Halloween masks and has this like spooky Halloween commercial. Um, and so they go to investigate it in this town. Is it Saint Mira, um, which is a fictional town, but they go to investigate, and eventually they end up kind of infiltrating the factory, and they figure out that this company was actually harnessing some mystical powers from a piece of Stonehenge that they stole, um, and is trying to make a giant sacrifice of a bunch of kids on Halloween because their commercial, I think, will like activate a chip in all of these masks they were selling, and that chip will kill the kids.
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
That's by the end, but
Yeah.
we kind of skipped over the beginning, which is kind of a lot of there's a lot of beginning. I will say this movie, the pay, this is my second time seeing it, and
Yeah.
I didn't like it as much this time around, partially because of the pacing, I think like that opening scene, there's a guy being chased, and like just the way it's cut together, like none of the action feels like it's happening. It feels like they just needed to cut everything a little bit tighter.
Hmm.
Like, but I don't know. There's just a lot of opening because this guy's getting chased. He ends up getting to the gas station. The gas station guy calls or brings him to the hospital because he's freaking out, and he's like, "They're chasing, they're coming," or whatever. Then we meet Dr. Dan. He like sexually harasses a couple people, whatever. No big deal. Obviously, it was the 80s, whatever. That's how the movie treats it. This is our hero who's
Yeah.
just like kind of a creep.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy goes into the hospital and kills the original guy who was running away. He like gouges his eyes out and like crushes his head, which is a cool
Yeah.
special effect.
We like that.
And then the guy's daughter comes the next day. Also, they're
And
telling us
this is
what day
Ellie.
it is all the time. The movie starts on like the 23rd, I think. October 23rd.
Yeah.
So then on
That's right.
October 24th, the daughter comes by and uh she's like, "Oh no, my dad's been killed." And then she for some reason her and Dr. Dan team up and start like hooking up and whatever. And they try to investigate and then eventually they end up in St. Mira, maybe like 45 minutes into the movie, 30
Yeah, but
minutes.
I just wanted to skip to that part.
Yeah, that's well, I felt the same way a little bit, you know.
Um, I think yeah, so that I mean I think that that is a good thing to acknowledge though, is that beginning part. And that it kind of introduces our characters, right?
Yeah,
Because Ellie is that intro guy who gets killed. Her she's the daughter, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. Um Also, just as a quick side note about the whole Ellie and Dr. Dan thing, there is like a 30-year age difference or something between them. And I remember, like, I had seen this movie when I was a kid, and I remember you and I watched this together a couple years ago. My first like adult viewing of this, right? And I remember us joking around when they were like flirting and whatnot, like right when they get to the motel, and we were like, "That's silly. That's not gonna happen." And
yeah,
then like it happens so soon, like pretty much right when they're at the hotel, they
yeah.
hook up. Weird.
It's very weird. I think there's they could have done it this way, or they could have done the annoying thing of will they or won't they, and then at the very end they kiss or something like that. Or they could have done probably the more modern thing of just they don't hook up at all and it's
Hmm.
not as weird. Maybe that would have been the best option.
Yeah.
Um, but or just have like a completely different main or just get rid of Dr. Dan. He's
Yeah.
completely useless. He
You don't
does
need him.
nothing. She could have just we actually could have followed Ellie and
Yeah.
she's investigating her father's death. She goes to this town. Now she's a woman alone in a town trying to figure out what's going on. And then
Although at the end, we get this scene where Ellie is replaced. So important part of the movie is that this
yeah,
company uses androids, right? So uh the people that get killed are killed by androids. That's why they can gouge people's eyes out. And I think they like, do they rip someone's head off? No.
yeah, they do. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so, but then at the end, Ellie is actually presumably replaced with an android. So she like attacks Dr. Dan in the car when they're leaving.
Right.
Um, Although, so if we followed Ellie, that ending part might be, what's going on. They'd have to change that a bit.
Yeah, they could have changed. Yeah, but they could have changed that some other way. She could have
Yeah.
met someone in the town that tried to help her, and then
Yeah.
that person gets replaced, maybe something like that.
Although I did see a theory online that potentially Ellie was an android the whole time. Uh, and
No,
so she goes to help investigate to essentially stop like to foil the investigation.
these fan theories have gone too far.
I don't actually support this. This is not my Raising
Well,
Arizona fan
it's
theory.
not
I don't support it.
it's not established like I don't think the androids ever speak. Like, right?
Right.
They're just
Right.
they so she's very human the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although at the very end, when she's with him in the car, she's acting normal, right?
Yeah, I think so. Which kind
Yeah,
of
that
kills
was
the
kind of
whole
weird.
like surprise that she's an android. They should have had her more robotic at the end, I think,
Yeah, something like that.
to help that. But
He could have been like, "Oh, you're in shock" or something, and that's why you're acting weird. That'd be funny.
Yeah. So it's also like one important thing about this movie is like there's no Michael Myers. Uh and so this is an important part of the movie because John Carpenter actually didn't really want Michael Myers to be like the returning face of Halloween necessarily. He wanted it to be originally like an anthology series that just takes place on Halloween night. Um, and the first movie did so well, so he was like convinced, forced by the company or the producers, the production company, to do another Michael Myers movie. And so by the time he did this one, people were expecting Michael Myers again.
Right.
And he only agreed to produce this one if it wasn't going to be Michael Myers. Um, so they were able to do the thing that he wanted and try to make this an anthology thing. Um, and it flopped, right? I mean, like people were expecting Michael Myers. It did not do well. It also came out the same year as Friday the 13th Part 3. Like Jason gets his iconic mask the same year that Michael Myers is not in his movie.
Yeah.
So I think like the setting of like the historical context around when the movie came out, and maybe like people's expectations is an important part of like I think it's kind of gotten a little bit of like cult recognition now, even though it's not like the best movie ever, but I think there's more recognition to some of the stuff that it does today than when it came out.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, I don't know. 82 is kind of an interesting year because like The Thing and Blade Runner also come out and those both kind of flop too. So I don't
Yeah.
know. E.T. comes out in 82 and that's a big huge hit obviously. So maybe Pete maybe it was more of a hopeful period. This is kind of a darker movie, you know.
Oh
And
my God. Yeah.
I think maybe that is part of it and also yeah, no Michael Myers seemed to just throw people. That's not what they wanted.
Yeah. Definitely kind of a darker movie. I mean, it's about killing like
It
a lot of kids.
Yeah, and it's about the Irish. I mean, what darker people exist? No. Yeah,
Yeah.
this I put in my notes. I said nothing is scarier than the Irish. But apparently, in this movie, the Irish is that's the scariest thing to ever exist.
Yeah, this movie was very like I mean it's very like anti-capitalism and it's very anti-consumer. It's also very anti-Irish, it seems.
It's kind of a weird detail. Like, there's
Yeah.
no need for them to be like this Irish town in California,
Yeah.
which I don't think exists. But like clearly this should have been set on the East Coast or something, and they
Yeah,
just
like
filmed it in
Boston.
California because it was cheaper and that's where you film
Yeah.
things, right? Like just kind of a strange thing. But I guess also you can't make it like Native Americans or like a Mexican town in California because then it's like more racist. So maybe that's
Yeah.
why they didn't want it to, right? So
Yeah, same if you did like an Irish town like in Massachusetts, it'd be racist. Well, more racist.
well, yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean
But it
it
kind
still
of, at
is.
least it would make more sense that there's
Yeah.
a whole Irish town. Why is there an Irish town in California? I guess it's
Yeah.
California. You never know, right? I mean, you never know. Well, I will
Um,
say,
yeah.
I didn't enjoy this movie as much this time around, but I did enjoy certain things about it.
Hmm.
I like we said before, the cinematography is pretty nice. It has like a nice widescreen, like 2.35 by 1 ultra wide cinematography that actually looks like really good. The night scenes are shot well and everything.
Hmm.
And I really like the synth score. Like
Yeah.
the music is really good. And I think John Carpenter worked on the music for this. I don't know if
Yeah.
he just did I think he's credited for more music than just the original score from the original movie, you know.
I think that's
Um,
right.
so yeah, that's a really good. Those are good aspects of it. It was just the storytelling and the way the story unfolds and everything. I thought had a lot of flaws to me this time around that I was impatient with the movie a little bit.
Yeah. Um, I definitely agree on those aspects. Like I think those are some of the best parts of the movie, right? They give it like a little more of a campy feel because it looks nice, it sounds nice. You can kind of you can kind of ignore the plot holes, the plot itself and some of the other stuff that's going on because the movie at least looks and feels sounds nice. Um, I'll add
Yeah.
to that, like I think some of the practical effects were pretty good.
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing actually. That those were definitely a positive in the movie. It's just that they're few and far between a
Yeah.
little bit. But when they do happen, they are really effective. Like there's one where a lady gets like her face like blown off by like a laser beam,
Yeah.
and like you see like her like mouth is like exploded kind of a thing. Like it's pretty creepy looking. So that those are very effective parts of the movie.
Definitely. Um, with that being said, like, yeah, the pacing and the story itself are just like they are by far the weakest. Like, even I think it's like even just shown in that beginning scene when like there's the android chasing the guy and then like this really slow moving car like collides into the guy
Yes.
and it's like really slow, but then the guy's like
Yeah.
apparently dead. And I don't know if that's because like was that an android? I forget. I think it was an android.
Yes.
So that's why. But also the slow moving car killing the android might be the best description of the pacing of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole opening scene, yeah, it felt lifeless kind of like the it
Hmm.
just everything was a little too slow. Like the android is like I think like choking him at one point. Like it's on
Yeah.
top of him and then because then it gets hit by the car.
Right.
But it's
Right.
on top of him and like but it doesn't feel like it's killing him. It just feels like it's like an actor on top of another guy just like
Yeah.
waiting to get hit by the car, I guess. I don't like it just didn't feel
Hmm.
alive.
Yeah. And even the guy getting like the android getting hit by a car, it didn't feel like, oh, that was cool. Like what's going on, right? Like it didn't make you think like, what's wrong with this guy? Why is he not acting like a person, right? It made you think like, why did they choose to make him die like this? You know, because there's like no
Yeah.
hints that it's like an android, right? It's just like the guy seems to have just like shut down.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Um,
And I think the android aspect of the movie, it's a reveal at the very end of the movie, but it's pretty obvious from like a lot earlier because
mhm.
the coroner calls. Also, for some reason, everyone wants to fuck Dr. Dan. I don't know why.
Yeah,
He's an
yeah.
old alcoholic deadbeat dad,
Glug glug
and
glug.
he's not funny. He's not hot. He's he might be a little rich for the town, I guess. Like relatively, he's a doctor, I guess. But I mean, Jesus, what this the coroner but that the coroner wants to fuck him. That's why I brought it up. But she calls him and she's like, "Yeah, apparently we were like we did an autopsy on the wrong burnt parts. It was all plastic and metal. Like there's no human parts here." And it's like, "Oh,
Right,
okay, well, I guess they're robots." Right? That's why they're
right.
acting like that. That's why they can crush people's faces. So as soon as she says that, it's very obvious that they're like robots or at the very least like clones or something like that, artificially created.
Hmm.
So like the whole rest of the movie that they're acting as if we don't know that, but kind of I think most audience members will have figured it out by then. So that was another I think flawed aspect that I was kind of impatient with this time around.
Yeah.
And maybe I was also I watched it alone. I don't know, maybe I wasn't in the right setting. I could see this being playing better in sort of a party, watch with friends type of a scenario rather
Hmm.
than alone. But
Yeah. This was definitely have a couple Oktoberfests with a few
yeah.
people type of a movie, right? Like, um, yeah, I think that might help my viewing experience because I was watching this. I think I watched it with my partner, and I was having a couple drinks, and we are just kind of goofing around and laughing, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely a more fun setting for it.
yeah, I think this movie is like it's very very campy, right? Like the good parts of this movie you have to enjoy them and then you have to kind of like laugh at some of the not so good parts like the stone like they so the plot like they steal a piece of
Yeah.
Stonehenge and
Yeah.
bring it not even over like speaking of it being in California they didn't just bring it over the ocean they brought it over the ocean and then the continent to bring it
Yeah.
to California and
Yeah.
then they they harness its power or whatever. Oh man, like
Yeah, and for some reason this like Halloween mask company is like the most wealthy and successful company in like the entire world that can afford to steal from Stonehenge and create a million robot henchmen.
Yeah, right.
It's
So
very
like,
strange.
yeah, it makes like no sense. Yeah, you've got to be able to laugh at it. It's very campy. It's it's also like it's not a slasher, right? It's like if you go into this expecting a slasher, it is very much not that. It's like a folk horror, like uh it's like sci-fi, it's kind of
Yeah.
conspiracy theory thriller, but it's also like a procedural cop movie, like because
Yeah,
of
it's
Ellie and the doctor, right? Like it's a
yeah, it
big like
almost
mashup.
yeah, it almost has like a mystery element,
Hmm.
like where they're trying to uncover what's happening. And yeah, all the people that get killed are kind of just random side characters we don't know. It's not like we have a big group that's slowly getting killed off. So
Right.
yeah, it doesn't, maybe that could also be a reason people reacted poorly to it, is that like if it didn't have Michael Myers, but it was still a slasher, maybe
Hmm.
then people would have been like, all right, like we'll see where you're going. But then they did this sort of fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, totally different take on it that maybe people didn't appreciate.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that could definitely be a part of it, right? Like it's Halloween, right? Like at this point, you've expected Michael Myers. You're at least expecting something like it, right? Like a slasher. And this is a very different movie. Um,
Yeah, but I think yeah, I think another sort of big flaw in the movie is that Dr. Dan is such a boring main character. Like
yeah.
he just constantly like abandons his family, and that I feel like I don't know, he calls his wife on the phone and his wife is just like a nagging, like, or his ex-wife, I guess, is like just like nagging him and like won't listen to him on the phone and all this stuff. And like it's very weird because like the audience for this movie should be younger people, and that's why normally the characters in like these type of movies are younger people. But then they make it the main character in this like an old divorced dad, and that's like a very different uh backstory that doesn't, and they don't necessarily explore it in like the most interesting way. Like he just goes and visits his family once, and there's nothing really interesting that happens there. And he just calls him every once in a while. I was like, "Hey, I can't pick up the kids again," and she's like, "Ah, fuck you." Yeah. And he's like, "Sorry, I gotta investigate this mystery, or whatever." So it was just kind of, it just didn't work for me. I didn't find him interesting or likable at all or anything like that.
Yeah, like it is an interesting question of like who was the intended audience because like this guy is also like the ladies' man apparently for some reason. Like you were saying, like
Yeah.
was this made for that audience? Like like a kind of a
It
male
almost feels
fantasy.
like, yeah, exactly. I was gonna say the same thing. It feels like a fantasy of like the producers or a writer or someone of like, I don't know, like the guy's a scumbag, but the movie doesn't present it as him being a scumbag. Like it would have
Yeah.
could have been interesting actually if the movie like explored his character a little bit more. And it's like, oh, he's flawed, he's doing things that are bad, but his life is a mess. But they never present it that way. Like it's very weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange. He's like which kind of definitely hurts, I think, the procedural cop aspect of it, right? Like I think one of the reasons why I like this movie so much is I also like I grew up with like X-Files, right? And then later in my life, Supernatural. Don't judge me. But like these kind of like procedural or like cop or like pseudo cop movies that are about supernatural things. And this feels like kind of like a feature-length X-Files movie to some extent, right? And the good thing about X Files though is that you love Mulder, you love Scully, right? Like in this, yeah, I don't like the guy,
Yeah, exactly.
which definitely
Yeah.
hurts. Yeah.
And another movie that came out this year, this is a crazy comparison, but The Verdict, the Sidney Lumet movie with Paul Newman, he's like an
Mhm.
alcoholic lawyer, and like the whole movie's about just his character, and it's more of a character study. It's completely ridiculous to compare this to The Verdict, but that's like a version of a character being kind of a scumbag, but he's trying to do the right thing and he's sort of turning his life around, and it's interesting and it's like exploring the gray area of
Mhm.
the character. And this movie just completely acts like there is no gray area or anything. He's just is the main character, so he's cool and whatnot, even though he kind of seems like a scumbag.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen The Verdict yet, but it kind of reminds me of what you said of that. What you said kind of reminds me of the movie with Robert Downey Jr., where he was a lawyer and his dad was kind of like a shitbag
Oh,
judge.
the judge?
The judge. Oh shit. Yeah, that one.
You were right there. You had
I was right
it.
there. And the dad is like presented as like this kind of terrible guy, and he's a judge, and then and he may or may not have killed a guy, and Robert Downey Jr. is like trying to help represent him, and the dad is just continuously an asshole, right? But then it explores like the gray area of like what's going on, right? Like, is he really just totally bad, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's another way like you follow this guy and you don't really like him, but then you learn to understand at least a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
You don't get that here.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen the judge, but yes, that sounds like a more interesting. They were trying to actually explore the characters.
Right. Which a lot of times in like slasher movies, the characters are less important, at least some of the characters, because they're going to die, right? Like that's the idea. But the main characters are usually explored quite a bit more. Like Sidney Prescott or like uh Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Whatever her name is in the movie.
Laurie Strode.
There we go. Wow, that was
I
amazing. Laurie
don't know why.
Strode.
I don't know how I remembered that, but I do
Yeah,
think that might come a little later in slashers. I feel like
yeah,
the early slashers, like the characters aren't as big of an interest. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's just the 80s ones because the early ones, like let's say Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Black Christmas, those
yeah,
ones have like better characters, I think, from what
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember. But once we're into the 80s, that's sort of just a disposable group of kids sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And maybe part of that is also that way you don't know if the main character is going to be the main character, right? Like they're
Yeah.
not as invested still. But yeah, and certainly by the time like Scream comes around, right? Like those characters have a lot more depth to them. Um, but yeah, and like so it makes sense that maybe like this movie wouldn't try to invest so much in the characters as something like The Verdict or The Judge. But yeah, I mean, we expect a little bit, like we want to like the guy or we want to see him get got, like
Yeah.
give us a bad guy that dies.
Right, exactly. Or make them interesting somehow. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah. Here's an interest. This is a random question. Is Have you seen the 2012 movie, The Cabin in the Woods?
Yeah, of course.
Is that considered a slasher, like a meta slasher?
I would. I don't know if it's yeah, I think so.
I
Yeah.
think so. So then is The Evil Dead considered a slasher? Like a
Ooh.
supernatural slasher? Like the original?
It probably can be.
It's kind of similar, right?
Yeah.
Like if Freddy is, I guess the villain isn't like there's not one villain, so maybe that's a difference.
I mean, a lot of people consider Alien a slasher, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
it's about the one. I mean, yeah, I guess that's the thing in the Evil Dead you don't have the one guy, but I don't know. I could totally see calling the Evil Dead a slasher and that being accepted.
It's similar. It's definitely in that range.
A lot
But
of
it,
slasher elements, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, even Jaws, a lot of people consider it not a slasher, but like a proto slasher. Like, it influences a lot of slasher tropes that come in later. But
Yeah, yeah.
um,
That makes sense.
yeah,
I'd never really thought of Alien as a slasher because it's sort of like whatever sci-fi horror and like kind of body horror,
yeah,
maybe also. But obviously, that's just a great movie. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think slash when I hear slasher, I do think of more of a cheaper like 80s like low
Campy.
budget movies and sort of the franchise sequels and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I think that's just where my mind goes first.
yeah. I feel that. And then like now you have like more modern slashers that get better recognition or are like just better movies, like Scream and The Cabin at the Woods, like things that kind of play on those tropes. But I think there's a lot of stuff that was a little earlier that was developing tropes that weren't like necessarily those franchise slashers. But
Yeah.
um, but yeah, this is unfortunately neither. This
Yeah.
yeah.
It's sort
Um,
of just a supernatural mystery horror thing.
yeah,
People do get killed throughout it, but
but again,
yeah,
it's no one meaningful, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah, nobody that you really care about or get invested in at all. Um, I will say in terms of like the campiness, like the ending scene when they're escaping, not the ending, but like close to the end when they're escaping from the facility. Um,
Hmm.
Dr. Dan escapes from the room, and then it was very campy from like that point on because like there's the point when the androids go to investigate the room and they take the mask off the camera because he somehow threw the mask right onto the camera. Um, like up in the corner of the room, he just tossed it and it landed right on there. Um, which is funny because it's a cut, right? It shows him throwing it and then it cuts to the camera and you get to see the thing fall into the camera. So I assumed that they didn't actually do that, right? They just threw it
Yeah.
and then, but apparently they actually did that. It took like 50 shots. And it's like, why did
That's
you
funny.
even bother? You don't make it look like you actually did it. So,
Yeah.
but from that point on, it gets like there's one part where like they're trying to sneak by like the main room where the Stonehenge piece is and everyone's around and they're trying to sneak through. So they have this like shelving thing on wheels, and you can literally like see their feet like shimmying while they're behind it, like moving it while they walk. It's like very Scooby Dooey almost like. And so there was a lot of like funny moments at the end there where I could not help but laugh. It was yeah, but then there's also they throw like all the chips down, and somehow all those chips I don't even understand.
They like light encircles the TVs and then the
Yeah.
it like kills all the robots in the circle or something like that, right?
Yeah. It was
Oh no, he just drops them down and they start like misfiring or something, like randomly. And they start
mm,
just hitting them
right.
randomly.
And it somehow kills them all.
Yeah.
And they're fine.
Yep. That's what happens.
Like,
Yeah.
so there was like a lot of campy good stuff at the end, I thought. But then there was also some stuff where it's like, I'm just supposed to accept this. Like,
Yeah.
also, how did he know doing that would do anything? Like, yeah. So I don't know. Some stuff that
Yeah.
yeah.
Did I wonder, what did you think about the family from San Diego and their scene getting killed? They
Um,
sort of get put in a room and it's very weird the way it happens.
yeah. The kid has the mask on and
Yeah.
dies, and then essentially like animals like snakes and bugs and things come out of him, and are
Yeah.
those the things that kill the parents?
It seems like that's what happens. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's kind of unclear. Like I remember that being really cool before, but then this time around I was like, what's even happening? Like are they just getting killed by this snake? Like why did a snake appear? Like what? It's very
Yeah.
weird because all it shows before is like they get shot in the face or whatever by the like laser beam.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts are like it's cool. Nobody cut this clip out of context. It's cool seeing that kid die, but but um yeah, like I don't really understand what was going on with the rest of that stuff, right? Like the snakes and spiders and things. It's like they just wanted to be like put all the creepy animals you can pouring out of this dead kid now. And I don't think we needed that. I think it would have been more interesting maybe like to show, especially because Dan's watching that, right? So it would have been more interesting to show like maybe the thing killed him, but then it also misfires and kills the family too. Like
Yeah, or
the sparks go out and it kills the family, and then he knows that like these things can misfire, and that's why he dumps them over the edge at the end. Um, and that would have been, I think we also would have gotten better practical effects of watching the rest of them die too. But
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't like the whole turning into snakes and bugs thing. That was kind of stupid.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like that it's like sci-fi, but then also there's like magic involved, I guess, or like
Yeah,
the occult, I guess. Like,
yeah. I think he's the main bad guy. Even says like something about it's a sacrifice to Samhain, right? Like very very magical, very supernaturally. Also though, fun fact. I have two little fun facts I want to bring up. unrelated to the ending of the movie. But one, Dick Warlock, who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2.
That's what they call me in high school.
Played
What a
the
name, Dick Warlock. I mean, how have I never heard of this guy? Are you kidding me? What a crazy name.
he played the main assassin android in this movie. So there's actually a shot at the beginning,
Oh,
after the guy gets away at the gas station, right? He calls for help and then goes. And you see there's like a scene where the camera kind of moves a little bit and it shows that there's like an android just standing there, and you see like his shadow in a very Michael Myers position, and that is actually the person that played Michael Myers the most recently,
that
which
makes
is kind of
sense.
cool. I thought that was kind of neat. And then there's also another fun fact is that Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956 was a big influence on this movie. And this is actually where the name for the town comes. Santa Mira was the same fictional town name as Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, interesting. I've only seen the 70s version, but I
Mhm.
definitely did like notice that I was like the town. It feels very like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or like Stepford Wives or stuff like that.
Yeah. Um, so I thought that was kind of neat. Just two little fun facts.
Nice. Yeah, and also that Dick Warlock is a person's name. That's insane. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. Did you know there's a pitcher in the MLB
Whoa,
right now?
whoa.
That his name is Richard Fitz, aka
Wow.
Dick Fitz. Yeah. So I don't know why, if your last name was Fitz, why would you name your kid Richard and then call him Dick? I mean, it just seems like a miscalculation by the parents there.
Yeah, have a little bit of forethought, you know?
Yeah, right. But yeah, basically the movie anyway, back to the movie. The movie ends.
This is the content you're here for.
There's some cool there's like a cool shot of like the whole factory explodes for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of all like red and exploding in the background. That was kind of a cool shot. But by that point in the movie, in my experience, I was kind of just done with it and a little like, oh,
Yeah.
I just wasn't bought in, so I wasn't necessarily enjoying even the cool parts of the ending.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then there's that sort of weird just twist for that doesn't make that much sense, I guess. But and then he has to kill Ellie, and he goes to the gas station. He starts calling someone. I don't know who the hell he's calling, but he's like, "Take the commercials off the TV, get them off." And they get him off like two of the channels. He's like, "They get off channel 3," and there's
The
only
third
like,
channel.
yeah, there's only three channels in on
Yeah.
TV, so I guess it's that works. But who is he calling? Is he
Yeah.
calling the TV?
Governor, listen.
Yeah,
um,
he's calling
also,
Ronald Reagan like right there.
the whole thing about the TVs too, it's like, are you just planning on hitting the people in that time zone?
Oh yeah,
Because the East, like, we're safe over on the East Coast, right? Like, it's good. You have 4 hours to take this shit off the air.
yeah. 3 hours.
3 hours, sorry, yeah.
Come on. You
Dude,
know.
I'm stupid. Yeah, like, yeah, anyways, just like a lot of like weird plot holes. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. I think there are a lot of things that they kind of just did, and they weren't necessarily thinking of the implications of it. Sort of like when the kid gets killed and his face turns into insects and all that. Like
Yeah.
they were probably just like, this will be a really cool effect and like a cool kill, and it doesn't matter whether it makes any sense with the story.
Yeah. These three main Halloween masks were a big marketing thing at the time. Um, these three silver shamrock masks that they see in the movie. There's like the jack-o'-lantern, the skeleton,
And a witch.
and a witch. And they were a big marketing thing at the time. And you actually see them in, I think, each of the new Halloween movies. Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. There's trick-or-treating scenes, and in each of them, you get to see a little glimpse of these three masks, which is kind of fun.
That is cool.
I don't think I noticed those watching, but I'm gonna have to. if I ever decide to sit through those movies again, I'll have to keep an eye out.
Yeah. I it makes sense that that would have been a big reason to make the movie even was if
Yeah.
this becomes a hit, now you have a huge iconic money making thing.
Yeah. I mean, think of how much money they made off the Michael Myers mask, I'm sure, right? Like now they were like, what if we make three?
Yeah, right. And they're more for like little kids, like anyone can wear them kind of a thing.
Yeah. Um, so I have a couple thoughts real quick about like the franchise in general. Unless there's anything else that you want to talk about just about this specific movie.
No, I had one comment I wanted to make about Hubie Halloween, but that's about it. Because speaking of Halloween masks, in Hubie Halloween, which I watched last night, and it is not a good movie. I would not recommend it. The kids in the movie are just wearing Scream Ghostface masks. And I thought it was interesting that the mask from Scream, which is only from that series, has become so ubiquitous and it's just a
Mm.
generic like Halloween mask now that it's
Mhm.
even used in Hubie Halloween, uh, which is obviously a Halloween masterpiece.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely become like kind of iconic for Halloween, even in outside of that particular example.
Yeah. Well, in
Like,
real life, yes. In but
yeah.
my whole point is that in real life also, like people just wear that mask and maybe haven't even seen Scream.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's just an iconic mask.
Yeah, if you go to Spirit Halloween right now, you'll find multiple examples of that mask. Like you'll find like a silver one, you'll find a gold one, a totally blank one. You'll find one that for some reason, like if you turn it upside down, there's blood dripping out of it or something. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, half of these won't even say. Actually, maybe none of them even say Scream on them. They might say Ghostface, but they might not. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely ubiquitous with Halloween at this point, more so than some of the like earlier icons, right? Like the hockey mask, the Michael Myers mask, the Freddy Krueger claws, I guess, or hat, but
Skin.
um, skin, yeah, yeah, uh, um, which is pretty
Anyway, that
cool.
that was just the unrelated thing about Halloween masks that I thought of. But
Yeah.
anyway, what did you want to say about the series?
So I just want to note that like, so here's a quick thing. We're gonna do our ratings for this in a minute, but Halloween one, these are just letterbox scores. I didn't do too much research, but Halloween one has a 3.8 out of 5 average on Letterbox. Halloween two has a 3.2 out of 5. Halloween three, this movie, has a 2.9. Halloween four has a 2.8. Halloween five has a 2.7. Sorry, 2.1. Halloween five has 2.1. And then Halloween 6 has, of course, like a 2.0, which is too generous. Um, and then I didn't bother going into the other chronologies, but um, these movies just have like a very linear drop off,
Yeah.
and it makes me sad. It makes me wonder if this franchise could have been the anthology series thing, or like I guess more like omnibus theory series thing of like different directors, right?
Yeah.
Um, that like that like Halloween movies could have been like every year just a new cool idea for Halloween, even if not all of them worked, right? Like, why the hell are we going back to Michael Myers in like Curse of the Thorn or whatever the fuck, the Curse of Michael Myers, where he's like, dude,
Yeah, they make him like a supernatural like
yeah,
slave to like this supernatural cult thing in the sixth one, right?
yeah, yeah, the Curse of the Thorn or whatever. And like him and Loomis like come. Of course, they have to bring them back to life also after like for the fourth one, right? This movie unfortunately didn't do well at the time, so like they had to bring him back, and so they bring him back for the fourth one, and they bring back Loomis, and it's like now you have to explain away that they're not dead, and then you end up in this terrible rabbit hole of explaining how he never dies, and then you get into this stupid supernatural shit anyways. And so, like, if we just got more interesting, different things for Halloween movies, I wonder what that would have looked like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that could have been a more interesting direction to take it because the way it went with Michael Myers kind of I'm not really a fan of it either. I don't really enjoy the Halloween sequels very much.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think this could have been an interesting direction. It's just I think this was such a big flop that they didn't want to go in that direction, and I'm sure the following sequels probably made more money than this one. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but
yeah,
I'd imagine they did.
I'm sure you're right. This movie, like compared to Friday the 13th Part 3 that came out the same year, this movie made like something like a ninth of the money that Friday the 13th Part 3 made. Um,
That
those are the
makes
only
sense.
numbers I saw recently enough to remember. But which, yeah, I mean, like again, there's that analog of like, of course, in the first Friday the 13th, you don't even have Michael Myers. Nope. Well, obviously, you don't even have Jason, right?
Yeah,
And then in the second one, you get him. In the third one, you finally get the iconic mask. There's like a more linear progression to building up the slasher.
yeah,
Um, this movie wasn't trying to do that. It wasn't trying to like add more to the Halloween Michael Myers connection, right? It was just trying to do its own thing. And I don't know. I think it deserved better. I think we deserved a
yeah.
better Halloween series that came after.
And I think the original Halloween is kind of like distinctive and well made to the point where the sequels can just never live up to it. Whereas the
Yeah,
first Friday the 13th is a lot more campy, like doesn't feel as like well put together. It's not like a pinnacle that the other ones are trying to reach. They're able to like build off of it and go different directions, and it doesn't feel like a disappointment in comparison to the original.
right.
So I think that's why part of the reason the Friday the 13th series has more longevity and like you can randomly enjoy number like 6 or 7 or whatever. Like,
Right. Yeah, they all feel kind of like campy and they're all like pretty self-isolated on their own, right? Like
yeah,
if you if you try to watch Halloween 6 right now, you're gonna have a bad time. You're not
yeah,
gonna understand much of it.
it makes no sense. They get too deep into the lore and everything, whereas the Friday the 13th movies, it's just like, well, he's back. And there's a
Yeah.
new group of kids, and it doesn't matter all this backstory about it. Although the early ones, there is a little bit more of backstory about Jason, but I think
Yeah.
that's fine. It still works for those movies. But by the time you're getting into the sequels, they abandon that, and I think that works better for those movies because you could just watch like Jason Lives and just enjoy it as it is without knowing any backstory.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this series could have been a unique, different thing, right? That wasn't trying to compete with Friday 13th or um to some extent a Nightmare on Elm Street later on, right? Like um but instead we get a bunch of shitty sequels.
Yeah. I could imagine maybe the studio making like a TV show or
Mm,
something like that that's Halloween branded, but is an anthology. I think that would be a smart thing to do. I don't know. I mean, the quality of it could vary. It could be good. It could just be kind of cheap and not good. But you could do like hour-long episodes of just completely separate things set on Halloween
yeah.
and branded with the Halloween brand, but not with
Yeah.
Michael Myers. And I think that maybe that could work. Put it on Shudder or I don't know, some streaming service.
Yeah. Well, I think the Universal did Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. So Universal, get on this.
Yep. And then make a universal ride out of it, I guess, right?
Yeah, and a streaming service too. Make
Make
your own streaming
make your own
service.
streaming service, make it everyone pay more money for all this shit. And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, drain us. Just keep
yep,
please keep
give us
milking.
a mediocre TV show and make us pay for your another stupid streaming service that barely works.
Yeah. And then might as well just put out a bunch of like true crime miniseries, that could be like a 90-minute movie, but make it like an 8-hour miniseries.
Stretch it out.
Yeah.
You gotta do that.
Anyways.
Just the worst like consultants ever.
I mean, these are the consultants that people talk to apparently. So,
Yeah, for real.
um, anyways, should we do our ratings and close off?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, what did you rate it this time around?
So I think I want to give it I would say a generous 3.5 stars. I think I more real like it was already at 3 stars for me before this, but I'm gonna bump it up to 3.5. It's a pretty low 3.5. I understand that, but I'm locking it in there.
Yeah, cool. I gave it 2 stars. I guess could be 2.5, but I'll just stick with what I rated it on Letterboxd. So 2 stars for me, but I do think it's interesting. Like we kind of agreed on all the good and bad parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Like it's just that you enjoyed it more and I didn't enjoy it this time around.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of came down to that where the negatives were just outweighed the positives for me on this watch.
Yeah. I think for me, like part of the higher rating, like I think I could have left it at 3 stars and I think that's probably more like maybe accurate, but I'm going up to 3.5. I think like I see the vision. I wish that we got more. Ah, I'm
I
so
get that.
sad that we have Halloween 6. Like,
Yep.
but
But
yeah,
yeah,
all right.
some people really like Halloween 4, right? That one's like kind of this 3 and 4 have their like people that are like this is actually like really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Letterbox has 2.9 for 3 and 2.8 for 4. Not that these are end all be alls, but those are like pretty decent, right?
Better
They're
than
right
the
up there.
5 and 6.
Yeah, 2.1 and 2.0.
Yeah, big drop off for those ones. Those ones do really stink.
Yeah. Well, happy Halloween.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
Halloween episode.
that's right. Yeah, this should come out. I hope everyone's enjoying this on Halloween Day or thereafter.
Yeah, we didn't want to do the original Halloween because it's almost too iconic. Everyone's talked about it. We didn't know. We thought it might be a little more interesting to talk about this one, but
yeah, we know that people aren't going to listen to these two schlubs talk about that masterpiece on Halloween Day, you
a
know?
million other schlubs have already talked about it.
Yeah. So we were trying to debate what to do. We thought Halloween 3. I think we both remembered liking it quite a bit, and maybe it didn't quite live up to it, but
Yeah, I remembered. I think I had it at like 3 stars before, and I remembered liking it quite a bit. But yeah, I think it's more enjoyable as a campy watch with friends
yeah,
situation.
yeah. All right. Well, have a good Halloween, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I also follow us on
Ah,
Instagram, Mind Your Movies Podcast, Letterboxd, Mind Your Movies. Comment on the YouTube channel, subscribe, and give us 5 stars on the podcast apps if you want.
yes, yeah. I mean, you don't want your brain to get fried and turn into, bugs and spiders. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I think if you don't do that, if you don't like and subscribe, I think that happens. So be careful. And this is when we'd play the spooky Silver Shamrock theme if it wasn't
Oh
copyrighted.
no, we
So
didn't talk about the song.
the song is amazing.
The song sucks. They play it
No,
over
it's
and
so
over. It
good.
gets stuck in your head. It's annoying.
And we love it. So go put it on repeat at your Halloween party tonight.
Oh no.
You'll be thanking us later. All right. Bye everyone.